So Linda, what are we looking for on social media?
People want to connect. They want to relate. We're social animals. They want to interact. They want to be heard and seen and validated. It's so important for us to spend significant amounts of time of each day and each week in conversation with other people. And technology is so efficient in allowing people to exchange information, but not necessarily to actually relate to each other. So I'm concerned about the direction that technology may be taking us in, that people aren't getting enough meaningful, significant connection with others because they're spending so much time on their screens, texting on their phones and emailing on their computers, rather than being with the person, seeing their facial expression and their body language, hearing the timbre in their voice. And there are things that go on, the brain scientists tell us, that go on in the brain when people are really synced up in their relating, that gives you a feeling of well-being that's missing when you're relating with the technology.
So it's a kind of a chicken or egg then, isn't it? Is it that folks do not have that kind of, I call it, and I call it what you're talking about, authentic experiences, right? This idea
Yes.
of being in person and whatnot. So are people going to social media because they're missing it? Or is it that they've come onto social media because of all the different little rewards and things that Facebook and Twitter has, and suddenly they're now, because of that, something has to give out of their lives, and because they're on social media, they're losing the authentic experiences? So is there a chicken or egg here, or is it a little bit of both?
I think it's both. I think it's a mix. People are looking for that and hoping to find it there, but there's a certain pseudo relating going on, that it's not the deep and meaningful type that you are describing. And so it doesn't really slake their thirst. It's like drinking seawater, salt water. And they keep attempting to do that. Some people are actually avoiding more significant relating because they don't feel adept and accomplished with it. So they substitute with what I refer to as pseudo relating, but it doesn't really hit the spot. It doesn't really slake the thirst. It doesn't really deeply satisfy. And there have been some studies coming out now that people who spend a lot of time on their screens and not time relating to other human beings are having a lot of issues with self-esteem and self-confidence because they're not honing their communication and relationship skills. So there's a certain level of depression that comes with that kind of insecurity.
Which kind of leads a little bit into this idea of FOMO, right? So if we're substituting these authentic experiences, this face-to-face interaction with someone, and for this saltwater element, right, that trying to quench that thirst, we're also seeing what we think are curated lives of other people, and we're starting to offer some element of comparison on social media it's not even a true comparison, right?
It's not a true comparison because people are presenting well on social media. When they put up their profiles on the dating site, sometimes they're posting a picture of themselves that's 10 years old. It's so easy to be deceitful. And people are putting their best foot forward when they present themselves, which is understandable, but it can set up a certain feeling of competition, that all these other people are so graceful and they're so slick and they're so poised and they're so smart, and I'm just a nebbish. And so it is an unfair comparison. And this FOMO that you're referring to, this fear of missing out, is really hampering people from being present in the moment that they're in. They're always seeking more, better, and different. And these people who have trouble, it's a lot of people committing, yes, I will go to the play with you on Saturday. I'm not going to keep my option open that maybe something is going to better come along. I'm committed. Do you know? They are working out their commitment muscles and they get stronger in that way. So maybe something more wonderful would have come along. Okay, so maybe you'll do that another time. But the word is strong. People tend to have trusting relationships when they live their commitment. And when their fears are running them and their fears of missing out on something, I got to keep my options open because something better might come along. They are not having the best quality of life. They're just spread too thin.
It seems like based upon what you're saying with FOMO, and there's an element of choice overload there too, right? So if I'm on social media and your example of I'm gonna go do something with you on Saturday, and suddenly, it's Tuesday and I'm on social media Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, and I'm seeing all these other possibilities of what I could do on Saturday. I'm overloaded with choice. We talk about choice and trying to minimize choices so people can make decisions and make commitments, but it's almost like it's the opposite. FOMO creates there's this choice overload that creates FOMO, if that makes sense.
It does make sense. And the scientists that are studying the brain, they talk about the overload, techno brain, that people are having too much information bombarding them. They can't process it all. And it does encourage FOMO when there are so many choices that people can feel overwhelmed with too many choices. And we're a freedom loving culture in this society here. And freedom is beautiful, but it can be too much of a good thing to have too many freedoms of choices, and to narrow down. And when we're so involved with our screens, we don't necessarily take the contemplative time to be mindful about what of my choices have the greatest heart and meaning in them. I do want to narrow down my choices. I want to do that which I believe will serve me deep in my soul. And when people are spread that thin, they're not really living the best possible soulful life.
And there's probably an element of, I talk in the book about this idea of people who we call maximizers, right? That they want to look at every possible option before making a decision. And they tend to, after making some decision, they tend to experience the highest amount of regret about their decision. That probably plays a part here too, right? So if we have, going back to your example of getting together on Saturday night and all these other options, and the individual picks something else on Sunday or Monday, there's probably going to be an element of regret no matter what they do, right? Even if they make a decision and it goes well, it seems like there's going to be something in the back of their minds going, I should have been with Linda on Saturday night. What was I doing?
Yes, there is chance of regret because they haven't taken the contemplative time to prioritize their choices and pick the best possible one. I see it a lot with some of the people that I work with that are from the more is better mentality. And as soon as they get up in the morning, they're checking their email and they're checking their text messages and relating to work-related items before the workday begins. They come home from work and may take their screens to the dinner table with them. They may take their screens with them on vacation and not have clear boundaries around, I'm on vacation, I'm not working. And so they're spread so thin for the fear that they might miss out. It leads their employers to believe that they're available to them 24/7. And so they're giving away their precious life energy, unpaid before the work hours begin, after the work hours are supposedly going to end, and even on their vacation and weekend time. It's not a good trend when the people in our life, both professionally and in our social life, expect us to be available when they text us right away that we should respond. That's a certain amount of psychic weight that people carry, that they don't really feel free to be living their life They're living a life of expectations that other people have of them.
So which gets into this idea, you mentioned boundaries. So let's dive into that a little bit. How do we establish those boundaries? What do, someone's listening to this and we all battle this on some level in this information age, but how do we establish those boundaries, whether it's starting in the morning with email or trying not to be so vigilant with texting and whatnot? Where does somebody who's listening to this, where do they begin?
I'm so glad you asked, because people really need to take that contemplative time to see where they want to start drawing their lines and to limit their screen time. Some of it in the workplace is going to be required, but not all of it. They may be able to negotiate with their supervisor and their employer to be on the screens less of the time, to not be available so early in the morning, late at night, weekends and holidays. But there's other places. The studies show that large numbers of people go out to eat. Maybe they're on a date, maybe they're with friends, and they're looking at their screens while they're dining out. Here's the one that really drives me out of my mind. The research that was done with over 2,000 people that admit to receiving or sending a text during sex. During sex.
I saw that, yeah.
The 18 to 34-year-olds, 20% of them admit that they either sent or received a text. Is nothing sacred anymore?
Well, so going back to this idea of FOMO and choice overload, are they communicating with another potential partner because they're having doubts about the partner that they're with, right?
They're cruising while they have a flesh and blood person right there available to them, and they're still looking elsewhere. They're not present in the moment to get the full value of the experience. So I think to get on the screens later in the day, not so first thing, to maybe keep the screens out of the bedroom altogether, to have rules about nobody, not the kids nor the adults, get to bring any screens to the table during meals. We actually talk to each other. We learn from each other. We relate to each other. We enjoy each other, screen free, and to have pockets of time that are blocked out. When we go for the hike in the forest, we enjoy the forest. We don't take the screens with us. Do you know, when we go hiking, when we're at the beach, there can be times where we very deliberately cultivate new habits, screen-free habits. And I think that that level of enjoyment and the quality of the relating will, as a natural consequence, rise up. Because that's where people get the biggest bang for their buck in the happiness department, is the depth, of their relating to the precious people in their life. So I wish that for all the people that I work with, when people come to my classes, when people come to me for counseling or intensives, in the blogs that I write, books that I write, I'm always trying to inspire people to make it the highest priority in their life, to relate well, to communicate well, to hone their relationship and communication skills, because they will thrive. And the positive psychology people are all aligned about this. All of the ones that I respect, that's where you get your highest happiness and well-being scores.
I want to go back to this idea of authenticity. You talked about it at the beginning of our time together, and you're alluding to it here again. Linda, I think we have a lot of lonely people right now. I think that we have people who are lonely, who are sitting at airport gates and sitting at their gym where there's humans all around them, and their faces are buried in phones because they're searching for something that's right next to them. This hypothesis of loneliness, I mean, are you seeing the same thing too?
I'm seeing it all over. It was an epidemic before the pandemic made people shelter at home, and that exacerbated it. But there are researchers who are monitoring the levels of loneliness in our culture. A very large percentage of people live in a home. I think it's 25% of the people in our culture live in a home just all by themselves. Some people really prize their aloneness, which is different than loneliness. But a lot of people are much more lonely than they really want to be. And it isn't just me saying it's an epidemic. The researchers are saying it's a more serious epidemic in our culture than obesity or smoking. But it doesn't get the attention that obesity and smoking have been given. I think it's sad that that hasn't been in the public eye more of the time. But those people who are suffering with loneliness have a lot of responsibility to dare to risk to reach out to other people. And those of us who know people who are lonely, who are more abundant in the relationship department, have a responsibility to gesture towards them, to spend some time with them, to let our deep well overflow and give to some of the people who are more isolated. But really, it comes down to each individual to tell the truth that they're not hitting the high levels of thriving, and that relating on their screens is not hitting the spot, that they need to physically be with other people, to look in their eyes, to see them smile, to feel them touched. Do you know? This is so, so critically important, and not to just settle for getting by, just to survive rather than to thrive.
It seems like admitting to yourself or someone else that you're lonely is probably one of the toughest things to come to grips with. To say to yourself, I'm not complete, as you're talking about. I don't have the in-person authentic relationships that I desire. That's a tough hurdle, right? For folks to say, I'm lonely.
It's extremely difficult to admit it to themselves. It's extremely difficult to risk reaching out because people are so busy and distracted and have so much on their plate and they're going so fast. But the alternative is just feeling a very deep level of dissatisfaction. So you can feel uncomfortable and risk, or you can just settle for having less than you know is your birthright to have. We're in an extremely competitive, materialistic society that defines success as money, status, power, and influence. It does not define success like I define success, with the depth and the breadth of our closest intimate relationships. And often what I find, and some of the people that I work with are in couples, they've got somebody living right in the house with them, but they're still disconnected and feeling very lonely. You can feel even more lonely when there are people around than when you're by yourself and you feel lonely, because you don't quite know how to reach them, how to engage them. And so one of the cornerstones of the work that my husband and I do together, we're promoting people to reveal rather than conceal, to express rather than to repress, to open up rather than to close, to connect rather than protect. And we know that this takes a lot of courage to do it. It takes a lot of resilience, because you're going to get some rejection when you do it.
Sure.
People will ignore you. People will be too busy. People will change the subject when you try to bring meaning into a conversation. But then you go on and you see whether you can find somebody who's game to play.
So I'm going to try out a theory on you. You can tell me that I'm completely full of it or not. One of the things that seems to me that contributes to elements, the feeling of loneliness, and I know you made a distinction between loneliness and solitude. But one of the things that seems to me that contributes to loneliness is this element of expectation that people are expecting. And maybe it goes back to social media partially and FOMO, where they're seeing pictures of everybody. It looks like a beer commercial all the time. Everyone's having a great time. It's Tuesday morning and there are pictures posted. Everyone's on the beach and they look great. And I'm looking at that going, what am I doing here? Does an expectation play a part in loneliness? Does the expectation, this unrealistic expectation of how much we should have in our how much communication and interaction we should have with people in our lives?
You're right. Expectation plays a big part. And there are therapists in my field who think that one of the things you should be doing with your clients is helping them to reduce their expectations so they're not so disappointed with their life. I'm not from that school of thought. I say, have a grand vision for your life. Have big expectations as long as you have intention to match. Don't expect anybody to bring it to you on a tray. We earn our way into these meaningful conversations. We earn our way into these tight bonds. We find our people, we find our flock, we find our tribe. Some of us are not blessed to have those soulful relationships in our blood family. If you have them, that's fantastic. But a lot of people don't. And sometimes some people have close relationships with family members, but they live too far away. So you can't see them as often as you really need to feel nourished. And so we have to go find our family of choice. So I say, let yourself long for it. Let yourself ache for it. Let it be your ambition to go collect these people. I call it my dialing for dollars list. Do you know, that's my real wealth in life. I got 30 names on my list of my most frequently called numbers. And I'm often the one that does the reaching out. Everybody's busy, but I know I'm a flaming extrovert and I need to talk and I want to see you. I want to get together. I want to be with you. If I can't, I'll make do with the phone, but the email's a little too cold and distant for me. Do you know? So this intention, you know, having a fierce intention, having a mighty and powerful intention, knowing you're going to take some hits, you're going to have some disappointments. Okay, fall down, get up, fall down, get up, begin again, begin again. Keep your inspiration level up that your desire is a worthy desire. Don't ratchet your expectations down so much and make do. No, be proactive and go after what you really want.
So folks are listening to this and they're saying, this is me. I'm on the screens 3 to 4 hours a day, not even counting my work. And I'm posting all kinds of different things on Facebook and Instagram and whatever to get that attention, to get that, to try to quench that thirst through the salt water. Where do they start? If they realize that that's them and they're hearing you today and they realize that that's them, what's the, besides reading your books, what's the first step?
Well, if people do read my books, it's all about relating. If they go to Psychology Today website, I got several hundred blogs in there, all kind of free stuff. I got over 100 YouTube videos. People can get all this stuff for free to keep themselves inspired because you have to keep working at it over and over. But I would say while they're relating to somebody on their screen, say, would you be open to getting together? What do you think about pizza and a movie? We can go to the movies again now. What do you think about taking a walk? What do you think about sitting in the park and having a conversation? These are for the people who are geographically more correct. For the people who are scattered around the world, around the country, I might have to Zoom with them. But even when I'm Zooming with them or talking on the phone, I try to take the conversation to a place that has more meaning. Try to be personal in the conversation, not just trading information, but having a rapport and a connection with them. But I think that people don't ask for the personal touch, for the physical meetings when people live nearby so that they could drive, to be in each other's physical presence. They've gotten used to making do with the technological connection rather than the more personal one. And I think that it's a good idea for people to put themselves out and drive the distance to be with each other, or fly, or take a train or a bus, and be physically with the people that we care about.
Last question for you. So we've alluded to the idea that we're kind of opening up here in regard to the pandemic. We've been sheltered for a while. People are talking about YOLO. People have reflected a lot. There's certainly been elements of heightened loneliness and whatnot. So as folks are kind of rethinking their this idea of YOLO and where they want to head and whatnot, what's your advice in helping them reflect on what's working for them and what's not?
Follow the impulse of your inner intuitive knowing. One of the beautiful things that can come out of this pandemic is when people had to work from home and they got to be with their kids and their spouses more frequently. And now they're looking at the possibility of going back to the same old pre-pandemic work. They may be rethinking, I don't know if I really want to do that. It was kind of nice being with my family, putting family first before work, not giving my couplehood and my children the leftover crumbs after I give the best at work. And I say to those people, right on, see what you can negotiate. There are a lot of employers who really want you to come back. They may be willing to write different terms. Maybe you make less money. Maybe you don't get the promotion. Maybe you have more vacation time. Maybe you have shorter hours and lesser responsibility. Follow that impulse if that's true for you. I know that when the extrovert relational person that I am, I would felt very deprived. I was lonely during the pandemic. God bless my husband, but he couldn't just hug me enough. I went 14 months without hugging my 3 grandsons. It was a beautiful day in my life when I had my 2 vaccinations in 2 weeks and I could go hug them. But I'm making more time to be with the people who are precious to me. I'm going to have a birthday next month and I'm throwing a big party. I'm going to have all my special people there. And I think that we can prioritize our relationships and redefine success in a different way, to not be run by the money, power, status, and influence definition, and live the life that we want to live. Don't allow anybody else to put our script in our hands. We get to write our own script. And if real relating, authentic relating, meaningful relating is high on our priority list, hallelujah. Live a life designed around that goal.
Linda Bloom is a psychotherapist and marriage counselor. She teaches communication seminars and wrote many, many books. And earlier on, you saw where you could find her work and whatnot. But Linda, thank you so much for your time today.
And thank you for the work that you do in the world. You're awakening people to not let technology hijack their life.
Well, thank you. We're working on it from different sides, but that's the goal, right?
That's the goal.
Thank you, Linda.